Ed Conroy, FOTM Hall of Famer. How the heck are you doing, buddy?
I couldn't be better, Mike. How are you doing?
Well, the only way I could be better is if you were sitting across the table from me here in New Toronto. We're doing this remotely because you decided to move a million miles away.
This is true. I am a country man now. I don't go into the city anymore. So I will make it out at some point because I miss our tete-a-tetes. I miss being in your basement. But for now, this will have to do, I'm afraid.
You know what I say? This is better than I'll take a remote with Retro Ontario over no Retro Ontario. What it takes to get you out, I think it's like a nice breakfast, like David Kine style. Like I got to do a nice Hollywood suite breakfast that gets you to the city.
It's funny. I love those Hollywood Suite breakfasts, but I always get COVID when I go to them. I think it's all those Hollywood people getting off jets.
Did you get COVID this 2024
Yes.
breakfast?
Yeah, I
Because
did.
I
Yeah.
was very close talking to you at
Yes.
that event. So I was exposed possibly to the COVID-19 virus.
Possibly. I mean, it's embarrassing to even admit that you're still getting it, but yeah, and I got it the year before. So, my wife said I'm not allowed to go to those anymore because I just bring COVID home.
Just mask up, just
Yeah.
maybe double bag it or something. I still remember, bless her heart, the late great Sue Johansson. I still remember tuning into Q107 for Sex with Sue and learning that sometimes you should double bag it. Do you have any? And I remember wondering, double bag it. I'm trying to visualize this, and I'm like, oh, it's like I have a young Mike has this epiphany of, oh, that's what double bag it means.
Well, I remember once, Mike, I was on the radio. I think I was on Newstalk 1010, and we were doing a story about firemen in Northern Ontario, and they had something that was called a double hat, double hatter. It's some fireman jingle. Um, but all I could think about was, yeah, double hat was what we used to say, a derogatory thing about certain girls, that if you were going to go with them, double hat.
My goodness.
Uh, I'm sure Sue Johansson had something to do with that.
Yeah. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. We'll talk later in this Christmas Crackers episode about some greats we lost in 2024. But before we dive into the Christmas Crackers you brought us here in December 2024, we heard a cold open off the top, Ed. Explain to us what we were listening to there.
Oh, I hope your listeners know what that was. It's only the greatest Christmas movie ever made. It gets lost in the shuffle, I think, because it takes place over a couple of months. So it does have some prominent Christmas stuff in it, and then it has New Year's as well. So that's probably why it's my favorite holiday film. And there's all this stuff now. People always talking about your favorite Christmas movie and Home Alone and Die Hard and all that, but nobody ever talks about Trading Places. And I don't know if that's because the director has kind of been canceled. He's kind of been forgotten about. But I mean, Dan Aykroyd, as far as I'm concerned, is an absolute legend, and his stature continues to grow the more I find out about his past. And he was riffing with Bo Diddley
Wow.
in one of the great little cameos in that film. So yeah, if you have not seen the great Trading Places from 1983, check it out.
And Dan Aykroyd we're going to recap some of what happened in 2024. Was Dan Aykroyd was all over that Tragically Hip documentary that aired on Prime. Did you see it?
I did. I actually sold quite a bit of footage to that production. So I was there from the beginning, working with some of their editors. Yeah, I mean, Aykroyd was a very early supporter of the hip. I believe he's the one that got them on SNL.
100%.
Yeah.
And he's fellow Kingston boy.
Yes. Yeah. They used to play in his bar in Kingston. And I mean, that's one thing I really admire about Danny is, his love of music, right? He was always down with the tunes.
I wonder if he'd love this song, Dan Aykroyd, who once held a door for me I think he might have co-owned the restaurant, but it was on Avenue Road. I once was taken by a rich person to a nice fancy restaurant I couldn't afford, and then Dan Aykroyd held the door for me. So that's my Dan Aykroyd story. Do you think Dan Aykroyd would enjoy this jam? Let me let it flow for a bit.
Yes, we multiply. Anyone press will hear the fat lady sing. Act like you know, Rico. I know what whoa, don't know. Touch them up and go. Oh, ching. Here comes the hot stepper. Murderer. I'm the lyrical gangster. Murderer. Excuse me, Mr. Officer. Murderer. Still living like that.
I think next year, if you're allowed, if your wife lets you go, I think when you enter the King Eddie to appear at the David Kynes Hollywood Suite breakfast, that this should be the song that plays over the loudspeaker. Here comes the hot stepper.
It's good walk-in music for sure.
Yeah.
I think, come on, Aykroyd would love that track. He always was a fan of black music. And yeah, I mean, 30 years of the hot stepper, man. That's crazy to me.
Okay, so this is 30 years old now. Hard to believe, right? This feels like a fresh jam to me. What's going on here, Ed?
It is. It's one of those moments, I guess it happens with more frequency the older you get. When you hear about an anniversary, that one kind of stopped me in my tracks because I hadn't heard that song in a really long time. And it was everywhere in 94. And, it was on Electric Circus, and it was every Gino in the city was blasting it out of their car. And, it was.
Can you say that term, Ed? I don't know anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean it obviously in any way other than that's just back then a certain type of, I mean, you could call them a houser, I guess.
And they would ride an IROC Zed? Is that what they
IROC Zed, really shitty sound systems, blasting this and assaulting people randomly. That's kind of what I remember about 94.
And I'm told here by my producer that Italians are fair game, so we can go nuts.
Yeah, that's what I heard. So.
All right. Do you think this would have appeared on an Extendamix? Not Extendamix, sorry. What was the Master T compilation? Was that Extendamix?
Extendamix. Yeah,
right.
Well, Dance Mix.
Dance Mix, right.
Dance Mix 95, maybe. It is. It might be, actually. It seems like exactly the kind of jam that would have made the cut on that series.
Have you seen Master T lately?
I have not, although I'm working with the Black Archivists of Toronto Society. I think that's what they're called, but they're doing a big exhibit early next year that's celebrating Master T and Michael Williams and the early Rhapsody days of Much. So I'm helping them out with some footage, and once again, it's just awesome to see that respect being given finally after all these years to those guys, No,
I love that so much. Like, thanks for the heads up. I was just at the Art Gallery of Ontario for The Culture, it was called, and Mishi Me was performing, and I loved it. I went with fellow FOTM Hall of Famer Cam Gordon, who's a member over there. He snuck me in. They don't let me in these cultured places very often, but I got in there. And they had like a picture, and it was a photo taken of like the whole, I want to say Canadian, but basically the whole Toronto rap scene in this photo. And I looked through the photo, and I'm like, I know all these people have been over. I love these guys. I mean, although Maestro was noticeably absent. I think he must have been out of town when the picture was taken. But I definitely saw Master T in that photo, and I'm like, wonder what Tony Young's up to now. That guy's the best. That guy's the best.
I kind of obsessed with Tony's brother, Basil, because Basil Young, legendary guy from the City TV days, right? He was a cameraman. And I think he was Kim Clark Champness's camera guy for a lot of the stuff he did. But a lot of that really cool camera work that you saw back then was all initiated by Basil. Another guy that doesn't get the props, although I will say at that premiere, you were there for $2.99, the documentary. Basil was sitting right behind me, and I think I was more excited about meeting him than I was Strombo or any of those other big hitters.
Well, you appreciate the behind-the-scenes people, and the average, the great unwashed, the average Joe and Jane, if you're not in front of that camera, you're sort of invisible, right?
Yes. No, absolutely. And I think it's only taken me about 15 years to figure out that is the point of Retro Ontario. It's to celebrate those behind-the-scenes people that didn't maybe get the credit they deserve. That's what, that's why I do what I do, I think.
All right, quick question, because I've been doing a lot of work with him lately and we've become buds here, but I need a definitive answer from you, FOTM Hall of Famer Ed Retrontario Conroy. Was Dominic Shulo the first videographer in Canada?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, because he's making the claim, and
Yeah.
I believe him, and I've been saying it as well. And then I got a note from somebody who was like saying he wasn't the first. But if you say he's the first, and he says he's the first, he's the first.
Well, more importantly, Moses says he's the first, and I think if anybody was going to have credibility on that, it would be Mr. Znaimer. But that being said, with anything, you get into the weeds, and there's all kinds of disputes about who came up with this idea and who first thought of Speaker's Corner. And I mean, that's part of the fun. It's like Rashomon, right? You interview 6 different people, you're going to get 6 different versions of what happened. And, Dominic, I think the first thing he worked on, I think, was I Am a Hotel, which was that weird Leonard Cohen video that was kind of a pilot for Much Music. We talked about it when we did our show in the summer, but that was 82, 83, right? City TV was obviously doing all kinds of crazy innovative stuff with cameras in the 70s. So before Dominic, I mean, he'll be the first to admit that there were other people there, that were doing crazy stuff. But in terms of saying I'm out, one reporter, one camera, shooting on a mirror, being the host and the cameraman, there's no dispute. It was Dominic really pioneered all that.
All right. Now, so you already brought up the 299 Queen Street West doc, and you mentioned you were sitting in front of Basil Young there. And I'm wondering if you have any updates, because if you weren't at Roy Thompson Hall or at one of the live events where the filmmaker Sean Menard aired it, you haven't seen this because it never did make its way to Crave. Do you have any update on whether we'll be able to see 299 Queen Street West on Crave or anywhere else in the future?
I keep hearing that it's imminent, and I heard in the summer it's imminent. It's like 2 weeks. It's going to be on Crave. I don't know, Mike. It's one of those things. It's terribly frustrating. It had such great momentum, I think, from last fall. It would have been amazing if it had dropped a year ago at Christmas. Everybody was hearing about it. I think now, if it comes out, look, it's a wonderful little piece, but I feel like that momentum's kind of gone. Like it's just now, if anything, it's got this reputation of, well, what happened to it? Like, is there something in it that caused all this trouble? And it really there wasn't. It was just a lot of stupid music rights issues.
Okay, because I heard it was shelved because it was suggesting that Erica M was the first female VJ. True or false?
Well,
I'm just
again, everyone has a different perspective on that.
I'm just messing with you. Okay.
No, I don't think it had anything to do with any kind of points that were made. And
Right.
Better than anyone, it pissed off a lot of people for different reasons. There was either too much of this person or not enough of that person. And I think, I know Sean quite well, and I think he's an amazing filmmaker. And I think that's a job well done. If you create a piece
Right.
that ends up a lot of questions come out, that's much better than something that just lands and that's it. There's no debate afterwards.
Well, as you know, I am a what am I? No, I'm an arsonist dressed as a firefighter. So I brought that up only to stir the pot a bit because I just spoke. So earlier this week, people can find an episode of Paul Farberman. And Paul Farberman dated Catherine McClenahan and got her into the recording of Tears Are Not Enough. And Catherine McClenahan was the actual first female VJ. And I just wanted to shout her out and grind your gears a little bit here before we get to the Christmas crackers.
Yes, I love when you grind my gears, Mike. That's why I tolerate these shows.
I'm not even recording this. I'm like, it's not Christmas till I grind you. By the way, and again, I look forward to other people seeing 299 Queen Street West because I know you worked hard on this, and a lot of that footage I know comes from your personal collection as opposed to a Bell Media library. So One interesting reaction I just want to reference here before we move on is Craig Halkett, who is an FOTM as well, but he was like really against the doc until he wasn't. Like he really had an about face. So I guess he saw it. He was against it till he saw it, and then he came around. I've been watching his social media posts. So you won Craig over. Sean Menard at least won Craig over with his doc, and I hope people can see it.
Yeah, I think, at the end of the day, that is what is the best outcome, is to see it and then go on Twitter and make an ass out of yourself. I think what was frustrating to us was people were throwing all these things out there and they don't have a clue what they're talking about, really. That being said, I think there are some major issues with the way that the story is told, with certain things that were maybe not discussed. But again, your mileage will vary. If you just sort of watched Much Music when you were a teenager, you're going to love it. If you're like an inside baseball person and you know about all these stories behind the scenes, then of course it's not going to tick every box you want it to tick.
Let's put it this way: as I've seen the doc, it's a great nostalgia trip. But if you watch this doc, you would think that 299 Queen was a drug-free zone.
Yeah. I mean, look, that part I understand. I think it's just taken for granted, right? That it was snowing a lot at 299. I thought you were going to go somewhere else with that. I thought you were going to say that you get the impression when you watch it that it was only Much Music happening in 299. And I think that's maybe, to me, one of the parts, if you weren't from Toronto and you were watching that movie, that's, it didn't really get into that synergy that was happening between City Pulse and Much and Bravo and Speaker's Corner and, all those, that ecosystem really was a big part of why all those programs were wonderful. It wasn't just something in isolation.
Right. Now, so the way we're going to work here is because I have a few rough notes and I definitely have Xmas Crackers audio loaded into my soundboard. I just, right off the top, before we get into a sitcom I watched like crazy in syndication as a young boy, I'm going to play something festive here to warm us up, and then you're going to kind of give it some context. You ready?
Sure.
Here we go.
Ho, ho, ho. Hey, Santa, I hear you just got in from San Jose. Got a little trouble out that way. But I got a song that'll pick up your spirits the most. It goes kind of like this. Christmas at Kmart, all over the store.
Christmas at Kmart, Christmas at Kmart.
People are buying just a little bit more.
Christmas at Kmart, Christmas at Kmart.
So if you're still shopping with money to spend,
Christmas at Kmart, Christmas at Kmart.
how about this album by Root Boy Slim?
Christmas at Kmart, Christmas at Kmart.
The mood ring counter is all aglow.
Christmas at Kmart.
All right, Christmas at Kmart. What are we listening to here, Ed?
So yeah, that's a great underground Christmas anthem by Root Boy Slim. I selected that one because, again, I was startled with something that came into my feed the other day, that there are only 2 Kmarts left in North America. And I don't know, Christmas maybe because it's the ghost of Christmas past, and we think a lot about retailers, right? That were a big part of Christmas when you were a child or when you were younger.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, Kmart was something that, it was all over the place. It bought a lot of Christmas gifts there, and that tune was always cool to hear. But yeah, there's only 2 left, Mike. How crazy.
Wow. Okay, so yeah, when I think about, these retail outlets of Christmas past, first thoughts I have are, for example, consumers distributing was a big deal.
Totally.
For me growing up. So I'll just shout out a few off the top of my head here. But of course, Zellers, of course, consumers distributing. Eden's was like Eden's and Simpsons. And I mean, we talk quite a bit about Byway on this show, but
Yep.
can you remember Kresge's?
Kresge's, of course. What Woolco? Do you remember Woolco?
Woolco and Woolworths, like they were like,
Yeah,
I
the
feel like it
Wool
was like
Posse.
the Wool Posse that kind of gave way to the Walmart invasion.
Yeah, it did set the stage for that. But they all those places had their own vibe, right? It was like their own unique feel, which is totally gone thanks to globalization. A Walmart that you go into here is pretty much exactly the same as a Walmart that you go into in California or anywhere. They're all exactly the same.
Right.
And I miss that. I miss the Wool Posse shops and Kresge's, and they were all great at Christmas time.
Absolutely. All right, here's a show great at any time of year.
Come and knock on our door.
Come and knock on our door.
We've been waiting for you.
We've been waiting for you.
Where the kisses are hers and his. Three's company too. Come and dance on our floor.
Come and dance on our floor.
Take a step that is new.
Take a step that is new.
We've a lovable space that needs your face. Three's company too. You'll see that life is a ball again. Laughter is calling for you. Down at our rendezvous.
Down at our rendezvous.
Three's company too.
Three's
Yeah.
Company.
You remember that one, Mike?
Are you kidding me? It was in I don't know what station anymore, but it was in syndication at a time I was in front of the TV, and I would watch that show 5 days a week.
Oh, it's CBC. It was on
Okay, there you
CBLT
go.
every day, 3:30.
And I knew the depending on who the third person was and that they were living with, because we started, of course, with Chrissy Snow, and then I hope I have these right, and then her cousin came in for a little bit. And then, of course, the nurse, Tracy. But yeah, of course, I watched Three's Company.
Good man. Well, a little bit of a lead up before we go back to Three's Company. The reason why I wanted to talk to you about it today. My big news of the year of 2024. I just wrote my first book. I submitted the manuscript a couple of weeks ago. It's going to be published next year, probably in the fall, I think. Things take much longer than I had imagined, but it's working with Dundurn Press, who are fairly reputable Toronto publisher. So very, very exciting. It was based on the exhibit, which I did last year, which you came and we did that wonderful episode with PJ Phil on the
Loved that.
floor
By the way,
exhibit.
loved that episode. Loved that day, and I think it was pouring rain. I think because I remember being completely drenched on that ride there with the studio. But loved that exhibit. That was on like
Thank you.
Degrassi and Mr. Dress Up, and you mentioned the YTV, the PJs and PJ Fresh Phil was there. That was amazing.
Thank you. It was an awesome experience working with the Museum of Toronto and staging that whole thing. But what happened, of course, during the exhibit, it was I just kept finding out more about these shows and, more importantly, these people. I was attracted to these stories of the behind the scenes, as we mentioned earlier, people that maybe weren't given their proper due. But also really, Mike, the insane lineage that existed from the very beginning in 1952 in Toronto that went through all those decades and really culminated with YTV to a certain degree in the 90s. But it was just, it was like you pull one thread and then I would find out about these other things. And so by the time the exhibit ended, I was like, we've just scratched the surface here. There's so many more incredible facets to this. And so pitched it to Dundurn and obviously built a much more robust story. So, of course, the shows you mentioned, Degrassi and Friendly Giant and Polka Dot Door, they're all a big part of this book. But I'm much more excited at the stuff that sort of been uncovered for the first time. And, I found out a lot of stuff that I didn't know, a lot of stuff that is quite fascinating and funny. And Three's Company, okay? Three's Company is basically the reason why children's television is so fucked right now. Okay. It goes all the way back to the 70s. And what happened basically from the beginning of television, and not just in Toronto, everywhere, I'm sure you know that children's television was a very small demographic, right? It was not important to most of the broadcasters. It was a ghetto. It was Saturday morning. That was obviously the marquee time for cartoons and such. And then there was this after school block, right? Sort of 3:30 to 5 o'clock, say. And time again, they tried everything they could to get that after school audience. They knew the Saturday morning, it's a done deal, right? Kids wake up before their parents. They're going to camp out in front of the television. They're going to watch whatever garbage you put on Saturday morning is going to get consumed. But the after school block, it was like time and time and time again. They tried different things. Nothing ever worked. They'd try cartoons, they'd try comedies, they'd try sketch shows, they tried all these different things. And what happened basically was older programs that had been on in prime time in America. So in the 70s, you had things like Charlie's Angels or Heart to Heart or Chips, the motorcycle cops.
Sure.
They started to run those at like 4 o'clock. And kids generally were much more interested in those programs, the grown-up programs, than whatever CBC thought, okay, here's a kid's show that's going to be on after school. And Three's Company comes along. CBC starts running it Monday to Friday, 3:30. And the ratings are just bananas, like 10 times anything else in the slot. And of course, the CBC is getting a lot of stick because, like, this is a goofy American sitcom that's full of sexual innuendo and all this stuff. But they just said, look, it's basically a license to print money,
Right.
not just in Toronto, but everywhere in North America. Is just they can't get enough of Three's Company. And I'm sure you have kids, you've been plagued by these awful Disney sitcoms, right? Like
Right.
all of them, Nickelodeon, iCarly, all that stuff. It all can be traced back to Three's Company because basically they eventually just gave in and said, all right, we'll just do sitcoms for kids because that's what they want. And it was a sad day because really before that, there was all kinds of fascinating experimental programs for kids, but none of them could stick. None of them could go head to head against Three's Company. So basically, it went from being a show that I kind of fondly remembered to really a villain, a villain that destroyed so many great possibilities that we could have had.
Okay, Ed, so a lot there to process, but first and foremost, congratulations on writing your first book. Like, I can't wait to tell the FOTMs to go buy this book. So when is it out again?
I believe right now it's scheduled to come out in September. And that's a rush release. Like,
Right.
the way publishing works, it's like it's even more convoluted, I think, than film production. But it literally takes a year to go from the editing stage to the proofs to the clearing all the photographs. And they originally wanted to have it out in 26, but that to me, just like we were saying about 299, I didn't want to lose momentum. And I think a big part of doing this now for me was to speak to as many of these people that are still with us. And unfortunately, even people from the 50s and the 60s are like mostly gone. Now it's the people from the 70s that we're losing at an accelerated rate. And, it was heartbreaking. So many of these important people weren't around. However, I had a tremendous breakthrough early on that I think made this project just incredible. There's this fellow, and I know we talked a lot about him when you came to the exhibit. His name was Fred Rainsbury, and he was the first guy that the CBC hired in 1954, and they kind of gave him carte blanche and said, you basically come up with a philosophy for children's programming at CBC. And he did, I mean, he moved mountains. He's the guy that, found the Friendly Giant, found Bob Hummy. He found Fred Rogers, brought Fred Rogers from Pittsburgh to Toronto, workshopped Mr. Rogers, the Mr. Rogers that we know that went back to America and was huge on PBS, all came from his work in Toronto at CBC. Obviously, Mr. Dress Up came out of that. Elwy Oast came out of that. He was hired by Rainsbury. He just, did all this remarkable stuff. And I couldn't believe there wasn't more information out there about him. Even the Tom Hanks film about Mr. Rogers totally airbrushes all of that out of the story, which is disappointing. And I guess last year there was a documentary about Mr. Dress Up, which had sort of a throwaway bit about Fred Rainsbury. But, I came away thinking, again, this guy's getting done dirty. Like, he's not getting the proper context, I think, of all that he did and all this world that he created. So that was kind of my starting point with the book. And then I found out his son is still with us, and his son had come and seen the exhibit we did and reached out to me and said, look, if you want to do any more, you've got the support of the family. And it turned out that Rainsbury in the early 80s basically had an epiphany that all these people that had worked on these shows from the beginning of the CBC were all getting old and dying. And so he started to go and interview them. He basically had like a podcast before that was a thing.
Wow.
He went around with a tape recorder, and he went to California, and he tracked down all these people that had, gone on to have other careers. So a great example, Alex Trebek, who had started at CBC Kids. He interviewed him for a couple hours. He interviewed Norman Jewison, who at the time was winning Academy Awards, but gave Rainsbury hours of his time. And all these cassette tapes were still around. So I was able to go through all these interviews and use them basically as a starting point for the people that were no longer with us. And it just opened up, this amazing world and this amazing lineage that Nina Keogh, obviously a huge part of it, her mom and dad and her grandparents were involved. And it ran through all of these shows, whether they were CBC or TV Ontario or YTV. So it just came together. It felt like this is meant to be. I wanted to write a book for a long time. I had started a few. I think I still want to do a city TV book. I don't know how that will manifest itself. But this one sort of came up, the opportunity came up, and it seemed like, okay, now is as good a time as any. And I think you're kind of the prime demographic for something like this, but because it encompasses really the 50s right up to the early 2000s, hopefully there's younger people and older people that will find something of value. And I'm sure when I go on the tour, I will come to Mike's basement, because I think
my God,
that will be worth the drive down.
Well, I like, again, my brain is racing in a million different directions, but right off the top, I got to tell you how you're so inspiring to me, because you're doing it, man. Well, there's a reason you're the first FOTM Hall of Famer. It's not like I haven't given you your props in the past here. You're, of course, the first FOTM Hall of Famer, because what you're doing, and I've been supporting this since I saw the WNED 17 or whatever YouTube channel, and I'm like, oh, this guy's doing it. Like, you're doing it. And I'm out there. I just want to tell you an episode you should listen to. Stephen Stone was in the basement a couple of weeks ago. Oh, was it maybe 1 week ago? Stephen Stone was in the basement and also promised his wife is making the next trip to the basement. So,
nice.
Like, there was a lot of kind of retro Ontario content in that episode. And I just want to shout out Rob Pruce again from Spoons, because he reimagined my closing theme, which is lowest of the lows, Rosie and Gray, and he added in some Easter eggs. And one Easter egg he added in for me because he knows what it means to me is the theme to The Friendly Giant.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's
Early
in.
one
You'll
morning,
people will hear that at the end of this episode. And a quick correction: I called the nurse who became the roommate of Janet and Jack. I called her Tracy, and the trouble with Tracy is her name is Terry. Okay, so I got to correct that. And one last thought here. We've got so many clips to get to, but Three's Company didn't just fuck with children's programming, and I did say programming, but they also fucked the Ropers, right? I feel the Ropers got fucked because they're part of this hit show, and then they're like, okay, we're going to spin you off into the Ropers. And then that doesn't work out, and the Ropers are like, can we please come back now? And it's like, nah, Mr. Furley is here. You guys are gonzo, dead to us. The Ropers got royally fucked by Three's Company, not bringing them back after their spin-off fails.
It's got a lot to answer for, that silly little show, I tell you.
Here's a show that might or may not have a lot to answer for. We'll hear from you at the other side. Here we go.
When he walks down the street, he smiles at everyone. Everyone that he meets calls him King of Kensington.
How you doing, King?
Thank God this king.
He finds his fortune in the faces that surround him. His wife says helping other people brings him luck. But then his mother tells a slightly different story. He's the only king around without a buck. He's a man among men, the people's champion. And when destiny calls him,
I'm sorry, that line is still busy.
he's king of Kensington. What a guy.
What a guy.
Wow. And you and I are similar vintage. I completely missed King of Kensington. So I caught, like, as a young boy, I'd catch references to it all the time, and I knew enough about what it was, but I actually don't believe I've ever seen an episode of The King of Kensington.
Oh, and you call yourself a Canadian, Michael.
Here's my
That's,
passport. I'm feel great shame.
No, it's another program that has been done absolutely dirty by the CBC. It's it had a very important role in the 70s. It was, the first program that really was multicultural. It was a sitcom that spotlighted, obviously, the Kensington market and the area. And, a lot of working Canadian actors and actresses got their break on that show. And it's funny because, again, when writing this book and reading interviews and interviewing people, people like Eugene Levy, he's a great example. These people were doing comedy, but they all wanted to be actors, and the only program that anybody could work on was King of Kensington. So quite often they'd get not even a line of dialogue. They'd just be like standing in the background of the bar or the coffee shop or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of sad. It's like if you were a working actor, then that was your it was either that or kids TV. So it kind of got repeated a little bit. I want to say in the early 2000s, I think the Comedy Network and the CTV Comedy Network showed it a little bit, but it's been totally forgotten, which is a shame because I do think it still holds up, even just to watch these up and coming actors. Mike Myers, another guy, his very first role, he's a little kid in it. But the reason I brought that clip actually was our good friend Mark Weisblot. We were conversing over the weekend last weekend, and he mentioned to me that would be a good topic because I guess there's some discussion now about moving the statue. There's a statue of Al Waxman, the King of Kensington, that's in that little parkette. But this is terrible. It keeps getting defaced. And with tensions being the way they are now, it's anti-Semitic stuff getting put on it, swastikas and such. A little less aggressive. There was a time, and this is probably 10, 15 years ago. It was when I was at BlogTO. Somebody defaced the statue and painted it the colors of the Joker, so it had the white face and the green hair.
Well, that's okay.
And I was okay. And it was like kind of a shocking image, like the King of Kensington reimagined as the Joker. But yeah, so Al Waxman, he passed away a while ago, but his wife, Sarah Waxman, is still very active in the community. And I think I don't know if it's a petition or what, but they want to move it away. So it's a very sad, again, reflection of not only the disrespect and the awfulness of that kind of anti-Semitic behavior, but also an iconic, Toronto legend kind of being forgotten about,
No, I'm glad you brought it up. Firstly, when you have these calls or these conversations with Mark Weisblatt, I need you to record these. Okay, these are episodes unto themselves when Ed Conroy and Mark Weisblatt converse, both in the FOTM Hall of Fame, of course. And just hearing you tell me that they're defacing this statue with anti-Semitic makes my blood boil. You know what we used to do in my day? We used to punch Nazis in the face. That's what we used to do. So I would put up more Al Waxman statues.
Yes.
One on every Toronto block. We need Al. You know what? I'm gonna get going on that project. But and it's just funny how when I talk to you, I say, okay, I'm gonna have 90 minutes for Christmas Crackers, and I realize, I need like 12 hours for Christmas Crackers, because even hearing you talk about Mike Myers on King of Kensington, sure, that's probably his acting debut, but the character Wayne Campbell, of course, it debuts on City Limits with Christopher Ward. And who do you think was the co-writer of those early Christopher Ward yacht rock type songs of the late 70s? Who do you think was his writing partner when Christopher Ward put out music before Much Music launched?
It was Stephen Stone, I believe. It was
Stephen Stone. Of course it was. You know this. That's why you're in the Hall of Fame. But I just think it's wild how we'll have these conversations and then sort of like Lester Freeman in The Wire, I can see all the pieces mattering and connecting here on my wall here. So well done here. Can I play a clip of our favorite children's entertainer?
Yes. Well, we got to get, this is the heart of the episode here, Michael.
Like, could you imagine if we recorded a Christmas Crackers and this gentleman didn't come up? I think there'd be like riots. You know what I mean? You'd be writing a book about that. And by the way, you absolutely have to come in the basement to promote the book when it's coming out. This is huge for the TMU. And by the way, the TMU in the context I share it is, of course, the Toronto Mic'd universe. This is massive, but let's listen to this.
Well, let's carry on with some letters. There's one here from Edie Marie Mumphy. Edie Marie Mumphy. What did she say, John?
Well, she's drawn an intersection here, and she has all of the things you need. Traffic signals, stop sign, a yield sign over here. She's drawn just everything you could imagine, perhaps to show the boys and girls there are many different kinds of signs, and that we must follow them all.
Must obey the signs as well, mustn't you? Okay, here we go with another picture from Monica Turnay of Burford.
Now, this is good advice
Buffalo.
For all of you people here, and listen carefully. It says, don't take candy from a stranger.
Now that's
all
very
the boys
important.
and girls should learn that, and it's up to mums and dads to teach them.
If somebody says to you, would you like a candy? What do you say, John?
I think the best thing is just say, no thank you, and keep walking right along.
Okay.
However, if someone stopped and said, could you tell me where the corner store was? Sure, they could point it out to them as long as they don't go with them.
Okay, so there's some very good safety rules for the day. Don't forget to keep your letters coming in. John loves to get your letters.
Sure
right now we're going to have this and then come back to Studio 5.
Uncle Bobby.
There you have it, chilling with Big John, reading some letters, a very captive audience. There was a bunch of kids in that clip, but they were traumatized. They weren't talking.
Well, they were wondering why their moms keep dragging them to the aging court studio. That's what's going on there.
So,
of Uncle Bobby, there's a man at Halloween who would be giving out candy.
the big chocolate bars, yeah. So of course there is an extraordinary amount of Uncle Bobby stuff that I uncovered when working on the book. Because as much as we like to joke about him, he actually was a huge part of local children's broadcasting
Oh my God, yeah, like we
for 2
joke about him
decades.
because we loved him.
Yeah,
Like I
and
do have great admiration.
totally. No, I know. We have reverence, and it's there's a lot of weird stuff. There's a lot of stuff that's not true. Um, but anyways, yeah, I every time, I think I've probably said this to you before, Mike, but every time I think I have a handle on Bobby Ash and Uncle Bobby, I find out some new bit of information that just blows it all up. So this one was quite amazing. I tracked down one of his original whack pack, one of the guys who was a regular, who's basically the last one that's still alive. His name was Barry McKay, and he was the guy that drew birds. He painted birds and wildlife. And he was a really young guy when, I mean, the show started in 1963. But he stayed with it the whole time, even, to the bitter end. And he's still with us, and he's still doing his nature artwork. And he was absolutely gracious and gave me a couple hours to interview him about all of it, about Bobby Ash's personal life, about the show. And man, it was just one thing after another that I was thinking of you, of course. I can't wait to tell Mike Boone all this shit. It was crazy.
Well, any teasers? I mean, firstly, is there any content you discovered that was fit for the pit, not too much for much, as we say on this show, that maybe didn't make the book?
Oh, like, yeah. Because I will clarify. I mean, I was quite, going into this project, I didn't want to get into gossipy stuff because I felt that there was so much great information, great stories. It would have been very easy to start talking about, oh, these guys, were drinking beer or smoking weed or whatever when they did these things. Do we really need that? No. So there was a fair amount of Bobby Ash stuff that I didn't include, which obviously I'm happy to talk about right now. I think the thing that I found out that kind of explains a lot of him was the fact that he was married, he had a son, and they abandoned him. His wife basically, this was after the Second World War. He came back to, he's in Britain, and his wife basically said, I've met someone else and I don't want anything to do with you, and left. And he spent the rest of his life trying to track them down. He hired private investigators. He spent basically all of his money. I think of it as like that Liam Neeson movie. Like he was just on a mission to try and find his son, and he never did. So that added an element of tragedy, I think, to the whole thing.
It's badly needed context, and this is why you and I are cut from the same cloth, where we have these 2-hour conversations with these people. Because if you just stick to the 5 to 7 minute soundbite, you don't get that perspective. And even just hearing you suggest that, it kind of starts to explain a lot of the Uncle Bobby that we keep revisiting and hearing about.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think he was just so heartbroken that he did turn to alcohol. I mean, that was obviously open. Barry was telling me towards the end of the series, he was showing up at agent court just absolutely hammered. And I think, the other thing that was going on with all this was the decline of the budget for the Uncle Bobby show. So that was, again, speaking of context, I didn't know how it had actually started. Like, I knew it started at some point in the early 60s, but basically, I'll do a short version. The long version is in the book, but 1960, you have CFTO becomes the first channel that is not a CBC affiliate that comes on the air in Toronto. Huge deal. You have the Bassett family want to start a network that goes across Canada, competes with CBC, but is a commercial network, not a public broadcaster. And so they had all these grandiose plans for children's shows, and they had a ton of dough. And the very first day they were on the air in 1960, they showed 2 hours in every morning, Monday to Friday, this program called The Professor's Hideaway. And the professor was, again, kind of this goofy character that was played by a man named Stan Francis. And Stan Francis, your listeners and you, everybody knows Stan Francis because he was King Moonracer in Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the famous Rankin bass Rudolph. It comes on every year. And if you hear that voice, you're like, oh, yeah, that guy. So he was kind of on the level of a Mr. Dress-Up every morning doing crafts and doing all this stuff. But he got disillusioned by the decline of interest from the Bassetts, because I think very quickly CTV saw the money was in sports, live sporting events. It was in films. It was in news. It wasn't in children's. And they had an obligation, regulatory obligation, every X number of hours a week, we have to show children's content. But they just started to buy cheap cartoons and Professor Kitzel and stuff like that. And they stopped paying these hosts. And so by 1963, this poor guy, Stan Francis, basically has a nervous breakdown on the air and gets fired. And they had the set, they had all this stuff. They're like, well, what are we going to do? Like, we need to basically be on the air, to get the money from the government every day for children. And lo and behold, there was this guy who was a guest on The Professor's Hideaway called Bobby Ash, and he played a character called Bimbo the Clown. Right. That was his persona.
Right.
And they said, shit, let's just give it to him. And so he literally the next day came up with the character of Uncle Bobby and took Stan Francis's time slot, and it was just Uncle Bobby. And so that dragged on until, as we know, the absolute inglorious late 70s. And it has no money. Nobody cares about it, but they're still doing it because they had that obligation. And eventually it got so bad that they wrote him out. Like it was renamed from the Uncle Bobby Show to Kids Corner. And Uncle Bobby just showed up, for 5 minutes. And then eventually he just isn't even on it anymore. So it was, hearing obviously a very detailed version of that from when it started to when it ended. It was sad. And I think, again, it gives that context of maybe why he was a drunk and why, it was a show that a lot of people don't have fond memories of.
Just hearing you talk about, his alcoholism and what he was dealing with internally, and then realizing that, and he drove a school bus.
Yeah.
Like that's a bad mix.
He drove a school bus. This, okay. I guess it's funny in a way, but I posted an Uncle Bobby clip on the Retrontario Instagram because I was basically looking for people to come out and talk about their experiences, so then I could get in touch with them and see if they wanted to be in the book. And so this one guy posted, he was my school bus driver, blah, blah, blah. And I messaged this guy, and just a crazy small world. This guy lived in Port Perry, and he had a store, which I was very familiar with, on the main street in Port Perry. And he said to me, yeah, come by anytime. Like, I'd love to tell you about my experiences. And so I went, and he had all these different stories, but he said, kids would get on the bus, and he said all the troublemakers are at the back of the bus, fighting and such. And it would be, that's Uncle Bobby's our bus driver. No, it's not. No, I bet you it is. And then they'd say, you go ask him. And, some poor kid would have to go up and say, are you Uncle Bobby? And he would say, yeah, well, yes, I am. And this was a time when he also had a couple of daycares, which were called the Bimbo daycares.
Wow.
And he did that because Mr. Dressup did that. Mr. Dressup had the butternut squash daycares. So this was, again, if you were a children's host, this was a very profitable sideline. But one of the things, I guess, for swag, he had these pens with his logo on the side of the Bimbo daycare, but they were also letter openers. So apparently the way that Uncle Bobby would get these rowdy kids on the bus to settle down is he would offer them these pens that had blades on them. Well, you know where this is going, right, Michael? They carved up they carved up the seats and left, awful graffiti
Oh my God,
using
yeah.
these pens.
Of
And I
course.
thought that's a cool anecdote. So I put that in the book. I
You
don't
know
know if
what?
it'll survive, but
Hook this book to my veins. Can I get I don't know if it's gone through the lawyers and all that stuff yet. I need the version you've sent to the publisher, okay? Just in case it's. I said the same thing to John Gallagher because he wrote his, his Babylon.
yes, that
Babel.
was done. That was done during as well.
Okay, so there's a version that he wrote, and there's a version that gets published, and they're not necessarily the same. It's the delta that fascinates me. So you got to
Yes, of course.
All right, so Uncle Bobby, a lot of content in your new book. Can't wait to talk more about that in 2025. That's, of course, Uncle Bobby's filmed in Aging Court, right? At the Sifto studio.
Channel 9 court.
Channel 9 court. Okay, so I'm going to kind of call an audible on the line of scrimmage here, and I'm going to play a clip here in our Christmas Crackers episode for 2024.
So, I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!
I got goosebumps again listening to Howard Beale there in Network. But that's Aging Court, right?
That is correct. And that leads me to what was the most interesting nugget of information that Barry Kent revealed to me is that when Peter Finch filmed that scene, I'm Mad as Hell, at Agent Court, Uncle Bobby and the whole Uncle Bobby whack pack was standing behind the set watching that scene be filmed because it was a day when they were taping. So that's a very, very famous scene, very famous movie scene. Obviously, Peter Finch won the Academy Award for that performance of Howard Beale, and that movie is so ahead of its time. But the idea that Uncle Bobby is basically there.
So as you're telling that, I don't know if you get the same when you get these mind blows, but I felt weak in the knees. Like I almost collapsed to the floor that Uncle Bobby was in the room when that icon, and you're right, forget the fact it was filmed in Scarberia. Like if you're watching the Oscars, they might play that clip. Like what an iconic clip from a iconic movie. And Uncle Bobby was like just feet away, steps away.
Just out of frame. Yeah.
Oh my God. Ed, you're doing the Lord's work here, okay? That is amazing, and I only played it because you said Aging Court, and I thought maybe while we're in Aging Court here, this might be a good time to talk about what happened in 2024 with regards to CP24.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because we knew it was coming, right? I mean, I remember as far back as right after COVID, when I would go to News Talk 1010, which is not 299, but the Chum building right behind. Yep. And this was the scuttlebutt, right? That they were moving out of there and going to Aging Court. And nobody could understand how is that going to work? Like, how can you move from being at the nerve center of a very interesting city to Aging Court, which, let's be honest, is the armpit of Scarborough. Now, I will fully admit, since I moved out to the country, I cut my cord. I never got cable out here because it was just prohibitively expensive. So I don't, other than when I'm in like a dentist office or something, I don't actually get to engage with CP24. But I have heard from people that do watch it that it's horrible now. That it's very, very different.
It feels like they turned off a light or something.
Yeah.
Like, so we forever we're used to, you're right, Queen and John, right? This is the city. That was the heartbeat of the city. They were downtown. There we go. And now that they're in like Agincourt, is like they're badly imitating that set at 299 Queen Street West. And it's it's awful. Like, it really is awful. Like, I'm not a big CP24 head, but my wife likes to throw it on sometimes just to have it on in the background when she's noodling on her phone or something like that. And so I have seen a lot of this, and it's like they turned a light out. And I know everything changes, but it's weird that Bell Media, like, I'm curious for your thoughts on, like, how badly does Bell Media want to be in the media game? Because they seem to not give a shit about things like having their 24/7 Toronto news station anywhere close to downtown. Like, I don't know what your thoughts are on the future of Bell Media and media, be it radio or television, like CP24. It feels to me, who knows nothing, all pure speculation, like they don't want to be in this game, so they don't give a shit, and they're not going to spend money on it.
You're exactly right. And this is the great tragedy. It's happening not just here, but I think all over the world, is that these media empires that amalgamated broadcast television channels and radio stations and film production companies and video game studios and all these things, it didn't make sense in the end, because you're right. They are much more interested in stadiums and sporting events and telecommunications services. The production of content is like so far down the list to begin with. To actually make it interesting, they couldn't give a shit, man. And this is the great lament of the last of the great thinkers, like people like Moses Naimer, that were able to do both. And that's the frustration I think we all have, is you can actually do this cool stuff and push the envelope and make compelling content and be profitable. It doesn't have to be one or the other. But this is a very Canadian mindset that you can't do that. And so it sucks. And this year, I mean, the moving out of 299, the end of City Line, it was kind of remarked a bit in the summer when the news came out. You got my man Elton there, ready to pump?
Yeah, I'm playing it in the background right now.
You can never know what it's like. Your blood like winter freezes just like ice.
Shout out to Deanie Petty, right?
The OG. And, that was part of, I think, a really important lineage that went right back to the 70s, frankly. I mean, City Line didn't start until 84, I think 84, but there was, City TV was on the vanguard of women's programming, right? Of Mickey Moore doing those programs in the afternoon that were not just problem, like not just we're going to cook Rice Krispie squares and talk about fashion. They were actually about women's issues. And it seems very trite now, but nobody was doing that. And City Line had that wonderful run, right? With starting with Deanie Petty, but obviously encompassing many other hosts.
Marilyn Dennis,
and then Tracy
Moore.
And so when that ended kind of unceremoniously, it was just, I mean, we're talking about another big empire now, Rogers, but it was a very sad end of an era, I think.
Well, and it comes out of the same, Moses. And this is actually a gateway to a couple more things I want to talk to you about. But I will agree that when City Line ended, I did feel that pang of like, another Moses thing bites the dust. Like, one by one, they kind of fell off for a while. Speaker's Corner goes away. I don't know. Peter Silverman Helps goes away. One by one. And then here's another one kind of falling. And so a bunch of places I want to go. One is, and I believe like the press release was weird. And this seems to be the new move. Like, oh yeah, we're gonna get rid of City Line, but we're gonna fold it in as a segment on breakfast television. Like, so it's like we're not really getting rid of it, but of course you are. Like, this is all like PR spin bullshit, which I'm allergic to, as you might know.
Yeah, it's like when they showed Martineau the door, I believe the press release said he's going to be doing all these specials for us, and he's not really leaving. And then that was
Yeah.
that. It's
Well,
just
that was
it
Kevin
is.
Frankish's farewell, right?
Yeah.
And Frankish came over to set the record straight because he bullshitted the FOTMs for a while, but we smelled it and he had to come back and own it. But like, he gets a tap on like a Wednesday, and they're like, okay, Friday's your last day. And they're like, we can spin it one of two ways. And of course, usually a pride cometh before the fall. Shout out to Christine Bentley. But suddenly it's like, I'm going to go do documentaries and things for City TV, but it's all 100% bullshit. Like the whole PR spin on all these things really is what irks me. And there is no more City Line just because we're talking about $2.99 and everything going on there. I was going to ask you about the passing of Jim Waters. And I don't know how much you've read, but Jim Waters passed away like just less than a week ago. And he's the son of Alan Waters, of course. And he was at the helm when Chum is sold to CTV Globe Media, I think is what it was called there. And I wondered if you speak to that and maybe if what you could share. And I know you're still in bed with this visionary, but like his role in the ouster of Moses from Chum City. Like, I'm just curious your thoughts on all of the above.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Waters family, especially Alan Waters, absolute, unique, one of a kind, brilliant man who did what we just said a minute ago. He was able to be experimental and push the boundaries and create amazing content, but also be profitable. And he and Moses got on, very famously. They got on great, and I think Alan allowed Moses to do, a certain amount of artistic freedom that he certainly wouldn't find anybody like that now. And when Alan Waters passed away, and it became a sort of secession kind of situation with kids involved, then it gets messy, right? Because we see this time and again, it doesn't matter who the family is, but when you have a big media baron and they die or they retire, the kids tend to fuck it up because they either aren't interested or they just want to get the most return on this empire.
Well, HBO should make a show about this.
I don't think they did, but yeah, it would be pretty cool. So yeah, the Waters ousting or the son's ousting of Moses is another one of those Rashomon events where I've heard very, very different versions of it over the years. But there's no denying whether Moses left on his own accord or was shown the door. He saw where it was all going. He saw, like, City TV didn't just turn to shit overnight. Like, it had slowly started to favor purchasing shows instead of producing their own shows. And with the minute that happens, it's funny, the parallels with children's television, it's exactly the same. It's the same thing happened at TVO. They went from producing all of these incredible shows in-house to just buying shit basically from England or from America. And then once you do that, you have no identity. Like, do you think now a kid is going to ever get nostalgic about what CFTO looks like now or what City TV looks like now? They have no brand identity.
Yeah, no, geez, the character is what I miss the most. That's why I keep talking. That's why I still talk to the great Peter Gross every week. I got to get a dose of that cat. By the way, quick teaser, Lauren Honickman is going to launch a Bob Dylan podcast on the TMDS network. I'm just going to throw that out. That's sort of an exclusive you got there, Ed.
That's awesome. Well, look, I wanted to circle back when you were saying nice things about me a little bit ago. Right. Look, you're doing the Lord's work, because I realized when I was transcribing these interviews from the 80s that you are interviewing all of these diverse people from all these different media backgrounds or sporting or whatever. And in the future, there's going to be writers and researchers that are going to be digging through your interviews, and they're going to say, thank God this guy did all this. Because even the most minor thing that you might not, or I know you would have thought it was a big deal, but other people didn't think it was. And you've got all this remarkable archive. So, man, you keep doing what you're doing. It's gold.
Well, thank you, because at some point someone's going to write a book about legendary Toronto band Gah, and they're going to come to Toronto Mike to get the scoop on that one. So thank you. By the way, this was revealed previously, but Ed, you are such a busy man, you might not be caught up on your Toronto Mike. But Jojo Chinto has definitively said no way Jose to his Toronto Mike invitation. So I will not have a sit down with Jojo Chinto, and I'm personally very disappointed by that.
Yeah, I did hear about that, and I mean, was there a reason given, or it just?
I don't know, but Peter Gross was was brokering this deal, and Peter is the last man standing who cannot tell a lie, and he, in his best Jojo Chinto voice, gave me the play-by-play of his reaction, and there's no room for negotiation there. But since we're bringing up this scene here, I need to ask you one more question, and then I have some more Christmas Cracker audio to play, and then we're going to close by remembering some greats we lost in 2024. But I want to ask you about your friend Moses. So I know you're very close to Moses. You're one of the few people who have had one-on-one recorded conversations with Moses. Not that we can necessarily watch this today, but these exist in various canisters and on hard drives in Port Perry. But Zoomer has been taken private, and I'm just curious if you have any insight into, will Moses be as involved in day-to-day? Does that change anything with Moses's role at the Zoomerplex? What say you, Ed Conroy?
I don't think it will. I think Moses is, again, the last of that era whereby he needs to be working nonstop. Like he's one of these people that is a workaholic. He could never retire because he would probably just disappear. So I don't think it's going to slow him down at all. He's just as full of crazy ideas and initiatives now as he was, 40, 50 years ago, which is great.
Amazing.
I don't know how to read into that. I know Weisblot was speculating that this was what happens before things get sold. And maybe that will, but I would imagine, excuse me, that if it were to get sold, you would hear like a day later that there was a new Moses Znaimer enterprise to do with broadcast, because he won't ever stop. Right.
And we don't want him to stop, do we?
We don't want him to stop. We do not want that man to stop. And you must have seen a few weeks ago, an interesting thing happened. Nam from Much Music.
I read this. Yeah.
Yeah. She did a really lovely little article about him for TV Ontario for their website. Just saying what we always say, right? Why aren't people talking more about all of these wonderful things that this man.
But Ed, I replied to Nam on Blue Sky, which is where I'm hanging out. I would love to see a Retro Ontario account on Blue Sky, by the way. That's my Christmas wish for 2024.
Yeah, I've had a few people, but what have you abandoned X then?
I only copy and paste promotional Blue Sky posts. I copy and paste them to the app currently known as X, but I don't actually engage, or there's no stream of consciousness postings from yours truly. I only post those on the Blue Sky now. But here, just quickly, my reply to Nam, and this is something you will not have experienced because I consider you part of the Zoomer family in some regard here. But I find that with Moses, part of the reason why he might not be celebrated like he should be is that he really doesn't do any media he can't control. Like, I know I've tried as you know, I've tried so many times over the past 10 plus years to get, and I tried different channels, his assistant, his people, administrative assistant. I tried people on the inside, Joel Goldberg. I've tried so many channels. He won't do any interviews he doesn't have editorial privilege with. He won't. So
well, that's not quite true. And
okay, tell me, state me an example. State me an example.
Let's be honest. I think it has a lot to do with maybe certain episodes you did with other people, things that might have been said. Look, any great media baron, starting with Charles Foster Kane, is going to control their mythology as best they can.
Sure.
And I think, my goodness, I don't know of any other person that is as willing to sit down for hours, if need be, to talk about this stuff.
But with
However,
third parties?
well, of course, but he's just extremely selective. And I suspect what might have happened is they do their homework. They're not just going to walk in to an ambush. Not that you, by any stretch, would be setting a trap, but if they heard certain episodes where Komodos were discussed or whatever, cocaine on the switchboard or any of those things, that's like a red flag, right? They won't put him in a situation where that kind of stuff would come up. Whereas I know of a fellow very recently who's making a documentary about the CN Tower. He wanted to interview me, and then he wanted to interview Moses, and I sort of gave him that caveat of like, good luck. He's a really hard get. And this guy, I don't know, golden tongued, somehow got in and interviewed Moses for hours about the CN Tower.
But it's again, I'm speculating because I have no idea about that interaction. But it's possible that there was a pre-approved deal, like that he would stick to the CN Tower. Like, it's possible that if he has some control over where the conversation is going, he might agree.
I would recommend, if you do want to speak to him, maybe refocus what it is you want to speak to him about. Because if you just say it's a Toronto Mike sort of classic, what do you call it, a careerology or
a deep dive,
a deep dive on all this, that might sound a little sus to them. But if you say, I want to talk very specifically about, I don't know, like radio from these years, or the Waters family, or something, like, you might find they're a little more receptive to that. But
great advice, but you forgot who you're talking to, because I have no interest in that. But I will tell you that I almost had Gordon Sumner, the artist, also known as Sting, on Toronto Mike, and the caveat from his people was I couldn't ask him about the police, and I politely declined.
Yeah, I mean, my goodness.
Imagine I have a Sting on the show, and I can't ask him about the police picnic, the show at the Horseshoe Tavern from the Garys.
But that's the thing, Mike. It's a frustration that you mentioned Joel. We've talked about this many times. It's like and I don't mean you, but I mean, theoretically, you're a journalist. You have Moses Dimer. You have this giant brain sitting in front of you. You can ask him about all these crazy things. And what do these people do? They ask him about, ready to hire women with big breasts or some stupid shit like that, because they want to get a cheap gotcha. And really, like, what a waste of everybody's time.
No, but I agree. And if I guess I feel like 1,600 plus episodes, and there's no evidence of a gotcha conversation. I mean, the most gotcha it got was Gord Martineau sitting down here and me playing a clip of Ann Marskowski on Toronto Mike saying that he wouldn't talk to her for 3 years unless the red light was on. That is absolutely the most gotcha. And that only happened because she already stuck that in the public realm on a Toronto Mike episode. And I only thought it was fair that he have an opportunity to reply. So there's no gotcha going on over here. There's no gotcha. But again, we're all in the same gang, and if you have something one-on-one with Moses that eventually we can link to, that's good enough for me.
Yeah, I have spoken on your behalf many times to say that if you're gonna do it with the best. And Toronto Mike knows more about this stuff than anybody else. But yeah, I would, I don't need to tell you this. Don't give up. Don't ever give up. Just
don't give up. Oh, that's a shout out to Ziggy. Have you seen Ziggy lately?
I haven't, actually, because she works remotely. She's in Port Hope, which people always confuse with Port Perry.
See, I can tell the difference because that's where Wheels' dad lives.
Yes, that's right. There's a Degrassi connection to.
There's a sweet moment. I talked about Stephen Stone on Toronto Mike, but we did have a sweet conversation about Neil Hope, the late great actor who portrayed Wheels on Degrassi, and apparently he was very close with Linda, and we had a good conversation about that. So here I am. I can't tease my upcoming Moses deep dive, but I can tell everybody listening that the Stephen Stone episode, Stohn, not Stone. Go ahead.
Could we talk a little bit about him? Because obviously Linda Schuyler and Degrassi all plays a very prominent part in my book.
bet.
And I think, again, she was influenced creatively in the early days by some really strange things. Like, did it come up in your podcast with Stephen Stone that Hill Street Blues was the most important show in the Degrassi history because it had serialized storytelling, right? Before well, obviously it wasn't a soap opera, but it was the first primetime show that episodes weren't just standalone.
Right.
Like character stuff would bleed into other shows, and they applied that to Kids of Degrassi Street, which what a cool thing to do. And that got the attention, obviously, of PBS, who then said, look, we need something out of WGBH Boston. And, oh, by the way, we're going to age the kids up and send them to junior high. And I think, having spent a lot of time looking at all that, where Degrassi kind of falls off, it was this century. It lost sight of its roots, the roots which were hiring people that weren't actually actors, shooting it almost like a documentary. It became this thing that it was fighting against, which was a glossy American soap opera, right? When they went from having small scale issues like I got a zit, but I have to go get my school photo tomorrow, that would be a plot, to like people are going to blow up the school with dynamite, and it's sad because I think, again, I'm sure TV executives would be quick to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, that there's a place now more than ever for those kind of small scale realistic life stories of kids, right? Nobody's doing that anymore.
Well, if only there was a zit remedy for those pimple issues. And I did get on.
I walked into that one, didn't I?
Well, listen, I was fiercely angry that there was no studio recording of Everybody Wants Something by the Zit Remedy. So, we can't link to a quality recording of that entire song. And that, to me, right. We cannot do that. Now that Neil Hope is no longer with us, we'll never capture that. But okay, so... Oh, and get back to Degrassi, because there is a new Degrassi coming. It is worth pointing out, if you haven't heard the Stephen Stone episode, that Linda and Stephen, they lost control. They sold out here. So the next iteration of Degrassi will have nothing to do with the founders and Linda. And it'll be some American company will be in charge of it. And who knows what the future of Degrassi holds, but who really cares? Because
well, it's funny because Stephen Stone wrote a book with Christopher Ward, Whatever It Takes, I think.
Yep, I have a copy behind me. Yeah.
Okay, so I read that. I read Linda's memoir, The Degrassi Mother or Godmother, whatever. Right. And tons of great behind the scenes anecdotes and gossipy stuff and all that. But I still came away thinking, there's a lot of missing information here. Now, the girl who directed the film about Sue Johansson, I think her name is Linda Rideout. She's working on a documentary about Degrassi right now. I think it's a 3 or 4 part series that should be hitting soon. I sold them a bunch of footage. So I'm excited about that because I think there's lots more room to talk about how important those shows were and why they came to be.
Well, Ed, since Linda's going to be in the basement, a promise Stephen has made to me, he's going to bring her to the basement so I can have my 90 minutes of real talk with her. Send me all these questions that maybe send me the questions and I'll literally go one by one and get these answers.
Yeah,
and for Andy, okay? Shout out to Andy, the biggest Degrassi fan I know. Hey, so here's what we're going to do, because I can't believe how easy it is to talk to you about this stuff I love. But I'm going to do 4 audio nuggets for the Christmas season here in this Xmas Crackers episode, and then you can give a little context after each one. And then we're going to remember some greats that we lost in 2024. How does that sound to you?
That sounds great.
All right, here we go.
Now, go out 5 steps, then turn, and I'll throw the ball to you.
Okay, then I'll go for a touchdown.
Ready? Hop! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now turn!
Car!
Let's try again. Ready? Hop! 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Another car. Hey, Joey, why don't we play somewhere else?
Yeah, this isn't any fun. You want to go over to the park?
Okay. At least there won't be any cars there. It's too dangerous here.
You're right. Let's go.
Joey, Jesse.
Jesse, do you see what I see?
Yes. And I heard what you heard.
Talking leaves?
These badges are for you. When you play in the park instead of the street, you're playing safely. The street isn't a good place for games.
My folks would never believe this.
Uh-oh! The street cleaner's after me. I've got to go. See you later.
Bye.
Wow. Wow. Okay, what is that, Ed?
So, you might recognize one of those voices as Rudolph. The actress her name was Billy Mae Richards. Most famous, the voice of Rudolph. And we had already mentioned Stan Francis was the voice of the King Moonracer. But Billy Mae was this lovely voice actress who will be forever known as Rudolph and linked to Christmas. But late in her career, she ended up at TV Ontario, doing voices on these very, very odd puppet shows. It was another thing I knew a little bit about going into the book that I found all kinds of crazy information about. But it started with Read Along, and you must remember Read Along, the boot
100%.
and the pink shoe and all that. And they kind of turned that into their trademark look, which was these puppets designed by Noreen Young, who's a puppeteer from Ottawa. And they would shoot them on a green screen and then key it into footage of real life. And because it was shot on video, it looks really distressing. Like these are already kind of grotesque puppets, and then you're sticking them in, footage of, in that case, it was a bunch of cars driving on a street.
Right.
And so they have this real like psychedelic quality about them. And then they were very good with making a lot with a little. So they would create the puppets for one show, and then they just reuse them in a different show. And sometimes they were the same characters, and sometimes they weren't. So that was a program called Calling All Safety Scouts. And that would have been shown in classrooms, the basic road safety and winter safety, and they all had these kind of goofy songs that you would be encouraged to sing along with. But that one was fascinating to me because let's say that was the A side. The B side was a program called We Live Next Door. It was made to teach kids about their sort of civic duty. So it took place in a town, and it explained everything about like the post office and the police and farming, but using these totally bizarre puppets. And one of them was a pineapple, was a talking pineapple, who then was spun off into something called Telefrancais. And I don't know if you got the...
Yeah, let's listen. Let's listen.
Bonjour, allô, salut. Lisez parler avec nous. C'est formidable, exceptionnel, c'est excellent, sensationnel, c'est merveilleux, c'est magnifique. C'est les Français fantastiques. Les Français, les Français, les Français.
Woo! So that's my my first track on my new album, trap remixes of TV Ontario theme songs.
Oh, it makes me wonder, how are things going in the world of Electric Circus? Like, is there any plans for any Gen X doc on Electric Circus?
Yeah, so that was another one I was involved with, and as far as I know, is stalled / dead. Thanks to the fallout from the 299 film. Bell just said, we don't want to do any more work like this.
Yeah.
If you want to license footage of EC, we'll gladly charge you an arm and a leg, but
Wow.
they no longer want to partner. So I haven't spoken to the director in a while. I think it's dead. But that's what I alluded to earlier when we were talking about the sorry state of affairs, because there's all these subjects that I think are ripe for documentaries or for series, but there's a great reluctance to do them now because of these rights issues.
Yeah, it sounds like it would be exorbitantly expensive. And I always wondered about Electric Circus because when it comes to the Much Doc, you're only dealing with one cable giant. But I feel like Electric Circus is a weird spot because it was a City TV show, and then it was on Much Music. But City TV, of course, owned by Rogers, Much Music owned by Bell. Like, would you have to deal with both? I mean, it just sounds like a nightmare to me.
It would be, and we had sort of started to map that out. And I think, if you really want to talk about EC, you got to talk about Boogie, and Boogie was Channel 79. Like Channel 79 Productions was different from City TV, so yeah, it gets terribly convoluted.
Yeah.
The good news is Rogers seems to be generally less intense about these things than Bell. Not great, but not as, I guess, just pick your poison is what I'm saying.
All right, so shout out to Ridley Funeral Home on the Electric Circus documentary. So many Gen X docs pop in here and there. I got to track all the ones that don't happen here. But here's a Gen X dose, and then I got a fun fact about this I want to ask you about. But let's listen to this. Wow, love that reverb. Okay, I have the munchies right now. Just hearing that. That was a jingle. I guess when you got the munchies, nothing else will do. Hostess potato chips. That was everything when we were kids.
Well, and they came back, right?
Okay, well that's what I'm going to ask you about. I was in Nations. I was in Nations in the stockyards this weekend, and I saw munchies on the shelf. And my question is, do these taste like the munchies the Hostess potato chips we would eat in the mid 80s?
Yes and no. There's good news and bad news. The good news is there is definitely a throwback to the flavor. There's a lot. Obviously, the market is very different now than it was in the 80s. There's no WWF stickers. There's no small bags. I think maybe that was what threw me, right? It's like back then it was all about that little bag, right?
Yeah, like it's 40 cents
lunch,
or 45
right?
cents or something. Yeah, low it well.
And
Yeah.
the tinfoil bag and all the flavor that would get on your fingers. They've kind of experimented a bit. So there's popcorn munchies, and there's kind of not there's the regular chips, but then there's the tortilla chips. So it's quite different. But I will say this, Mike. I get brought into a lot of these things that come back. So people are looking to bring back a film or a show or whatever, and they 9 times out of 10 they fuck it up somehow. They misunderstand what made the original good. But I'm happy to say I thought the rollout for the munchies coming back was a 10 out of 10. Like it was as good as you could imagine. They brought the characters back. They had a really interesting rollout where they took over a space on Queen Street and they set up this kind of 80s, 70s and 80s museum where they had relics from the 80s, but then they also had old merchandise of the munchies. And, people went in there and took pictures and made TikToks and all this crap. But it was just a great way of acknowledging there was a rich history of these characters. But then, okay, here's the 2024 munchies. But I think most importantly, they're cheap. Like, I'm sure you've noticed, I mean, the cost of everything is crazy, but the idea that a bag of Doritos is $7.
Yeah, it's insane.
That's insanity, right?
Yeah.
So the munchies, the throwback munchies are very aggressively priced. So on that front, it's a big win too.
I had a moment last summer. So actually summer 2024, I think it was. And I'm at the Phoenix for a live to air like anniversary retrospective, because when I was like a teenager, like 19 or 20, I spent many nights at the Phoenix at these live to airs with the all the Thunder Kiss 65 and Beastie Boys and Rage Against the Machine and all my 90s aggressive alt rock. And I was there. I just biked over to the Phoenix and I'm there, and the DJ's spinning the same tracks, like there's STP or whatever. And I have this, I'm there and I'm like, oh, like you can't go home again. Like you can't recapture that because you're not 19 anymore. Like I was 49 years old. I had 4 kids and a mortgage and running my own business and everything. And you simply, the same music, the same kind of vibe in the same room, but you can't go home again because it's so much of it is tied to that stage in your life, that chapter of your life. And you're simply in a different chapter now. So it all kind of hits differently.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think you hit on something that is important in what we do, talking about the old days or nostalgia and such, is when you were young, those things implanted themselves onto you, and they're going to be with you for the rest of your life, right? For better or for worse. And I think that's what I find interesting about these kid shows is not so much, that I want to watch kid shows all day. It's that these were the first images that I was exposed to, in the late 70s, and they stayed with me. And I'm so grateful that it was things like Today's Special and not Paw Patrol, like what my kids have. And that's just like you said, you can't get that feeling again, but you can understand a little more context and be proud of it. So
right. And in nostalgia, I believe this, I'm now going to quote Don Draper, but I'm going to misquote Don Draper. But it's like a bittersweet memory of long ago. So you have the pangs of like, I remember when I was 19 and I was losing my shit to, Killing in the Name of at the Phoenix and like 2 a.m. on like a Saturday night or whatever. And then you kind of have this feeling of like, oh, now I'm 49 and I've got a million other priorities before that, and it's a bittersweet feeling, the nostalgia that we merchant that we push on people.
The nostalgia merchandise, yes.
Right. Okay. Oh my God, I could easily have Christmas Crackers be like a 5-episode mini series here. Okay, so we're gonna get to the people we lost. But if you were here, Ed, and you're not, but hopefully you'll be here when your book comes out, I will get you not only delicious lasagna from Palma Pasta, palmapasta.com, everybody. Ed, you love your Italian food, right?
I do, and I love Palma Pasta, so win-win.
And we're about to play one more clip before the memories, and I see it's titled Beer. So I'll just take that opportunity to tell you, Ed, I've got Great Lakes Beer, fresh craft beer from GLB with your name on it, buddy, waiting for you when you get here.
Thank you.
And because we're going to go cook with gas until the end here, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Season's Greetings, I want to let you know that Season 7 of Yes, We Are Open, which is an award-winning podcast from Moneris, hosted by Al Grego, it's dropped. Those episodes, those tasty nuggets, many of them recorded in Winnipeg, they're all waiting for you. You inspire me, Ed, and we can collectively be inspired by these small business stories that Al Grego has collected for Yes, We Are Open. All right, one more clip, Ed. Here we go.
Chug-a-lug, chug-a-lug, ooh-la-la, chug-a-lug, chug-a-lug. Gang's all here, let's raise the cheer. Have no fear, there's lots of beer. We're having a party, having a ball. I'm so high, I feel 10 feet tall. Everyone looks so sincere, including the ones on the chandelier. The only way to get in gear is to have a party where there's lots of beer. Chug-a-lug, chug-a-lug, ooh-la-la, chug-a-lug, chug-a-lug.
All right, that's the new Great Lakes Beer commercial.
That's why I put it in there, for you to knock that one out of the park. That is a really funny little jingle. They're going to tie this into somebody we lost, so this is a good transition. You and I did a show about earlier this year about Forbes and Magic Shadows. And
love that. By the way, the Forbes family reached out to me to say they all listened. It traveled through email to the Forbes family, and they thought you did a wonderful job paying tribute to Harry Forbes.
What a great platform. I mean, thank you for organizing that. I think he is the definition of somebody that doesn't get enough credit. Yeah. But that program, I can't remember if we talked about this at all, but the writer of the program Magic Shadows was not actually Elwy Ost. He was the host, was a fellow by the name of Ken Sobel. And Ken Sobel was another person that I knew his name from credits, but when I started to work on the book, I realized he was incredibly important man behind the scenes at TVO, not just writing Magic Shadows. He wrote Dear Aunt Agnes. He wrote Telefrancais. Like, he created Ananas. He wrote Read Along. He created Boot, all this wonderful stuff. But he also did, with the puppeteer Noreen Young, these shows that were for like Addictions Research Canada. So they were about drugs and about alcohol. That jingle, is a throwaway beer commercial that's in one of them, just in the background. But I just love that the craftsmanship of these guys, that they took it that seriously. Like, that actually is a cool, I mean, it's a little bit tongue in cheek, right? Talking about people getting, strung up on chandeliers from drinking too much, but it's just a really cool little bit. And it's like literally in the background of this puppet show. So yeah, I mean, I think when I come and see you, when we're properly promoting the book, I'll bring more of that kind of stuff and really revel in it.
Well, I love that craftsmanship. And again, it goes without saying that the FOTMs, we drink Great Lakes beer. But when we look at the conglomerates, the big beer companies, there's a jingle from Molson Canadian. This will kind of turn the page here. Shout out to Ridley Funeral Home. But we lost, every year we lose some greats, and I look forward to remembering them with you, Ed. But here's a jingle for one of the bigger beer companies.
And now, for Molson Canadian, here's Shirley Harmer.
Molson Canadian. Molson Canadian. Molson Canadian. Molson Canadian. Lager beer. It drinks so smooth. It looks so clear. Just right for folks who really know their beer. If you know lager, you'll agree that it has the list in brightness and in quality. So next time you've got a thirst for a lager bright and clear, drink Molson Canadian. Molson Canadian lager beer.
Enjoy Molson Canadian. It's the friendly lager.
Wow, Shirley Harmer.
That was the lovely Shirley Harmer, who passed away earlier this year. She was known, her sort of stage name was the Queen of Oshawa. She was from Oshawa. She performed a lot when that was I guess it still is a big GM town. But her family, it was quite lovely. They reached out to me because that was, speaking of Don Draper, like that was one of the few kind of 1960s beer commercials that I have, because obviously back in the 60s, there was no VCRs. So the only way you can come across these things now is from film reels. And I had this incredible reel of old Molson Canadian jingles. So they sort of said, do you by chance have the one of our mother? And I, thankfully I did. So we put it back online and it went out on Instagram, and it was just nice to see something come back into circulation and to remember the Queen of Oshawa.
Amazing. And we lost another queen in 2024. Let's spend a couple of minutes listening to this.
everyone. Today's special, come join in the fun. With magic everywhere, a world for us to share. And friendly faces hoping that you'll want to meet us there. For today's special, it's about to appear, it's about to appear. Today's special, shout it loud and clear.
Take it, Oscar!
It's about to appear, it's about to appear. Today's special, shout it loud and clear. Today's special.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's a sad one, Ed. Personally, this one hit me pretty hard.
Yeah, I think it did. I think it hit a lot of our generation so hard because I mean, we talk a lot about Sesame Street, the death of Mr. Hooper on Sesame Street, but you know, I've always felt the episode about death that was produced by Today's Special with the butterfly is much more powerful because it's hits you on that personal level. So yeah, to find out that Jody had passed away was a real gut punch. And I don't think I've ever seen on anything I've posted remembering someone's legacy a reaction that I saw online with Noreen Virgin. And I think that's just because whether it was Today's Special or Eye on Toronto or any of the things that she did. I mean, she was in an episode of Littlest Hobo. She was a Polka Dot Door host. She just had this absolutely magnetic personality and everybody looked up to her like a mom. So that was a tough one.
Absolutely, Noreen Virgin, and I hope Jody's jumpsuit on Twitter is okay.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about everyone leaving Twitter. I didn't really answer you. I haven't set anything up on Blue Sky because I feel like there was other places and it just I kind of want.
You're an Instagram guy, anyways. Really, you're an Instagram guy.
I'm an Instagram. I mean, really, I YouTube is my mothership,
of course.
But I just want to see where everything lands before I commit. There was that terrible Threads. What was that?
Yeah, I hated Threads with a great passion. Yeah. You know what? I like you, so I've been kind of looking elsewhere since Elon bought Twitter and FOTM Hall of Famer Cam Gordon got gassed along with most of the Canadian office. But I test drove a whole whack of places to see where it felt right for me, like because I need to enjoy this shit. And I landed on Blue Sky, but you and Jody's jumpsuit are not there, and not everybody is there. But regardless, Noreen Virgin, this death, I didn't see it coming, and I had very, very shortly before that tried my best to communicate to Noreen Virgin that I would absolutely love to have her on Toronto Mic'd, and I never heard back, and now we've lost her. So yeah, that's a big one, and another big one too. Although I won't have a piece of audio to accompany it here, but when I graduated with my wonderful degree from U of T, I was at Convocation Hall with, I don't know, a couple of thousand other people, and Ivan Reitman did the keynote address, the late, great Ivan Reitman, and I got to shake his hand, but also on stage to shake hands of all the graduates was Norman Jewison.
Oh, that's so cool. That's awesome. I didn't know that he did that.
He had some title, and I forget, some honorary chancellor type title where he would be a part of all these convocation ceremonies, at least in the late 90s when I got my piece of paper there. But we lost Norman Jewison.
Yeah, absolute mountain of a person. Obviously best known for his Hollywood years, his Academy Award winning films. I mean, you know, take your pick. I think my favorite of his Hollywood movies is probably Rollerball with James Caan. It's a really weird science fiction movie from the 70s, but he did all this great stuff. And then I started to become very interested in him when we were doing the exhibit with the kids shows, because uh, um, you know, his name kept coming up as being somebody that was responsible for Uncle Chichimus, which was the original puppet that came on CBC when they started broadcasting. And it was actually Nina Keogh who said, "Oh yeah, you gotta look into him, because he gets credited with, he did all these other shows at CBC in the early days, like music variety shows and all that. But it turns out he actually kind of did all this crazy stuff with puppets, stuff that Jim Henson, okay, gets a lot of accolades for what he did like 2 decades later. And thankfully, Fred Rainsbury had interviewed Norman Jewison, and I was able to get that interview and go through it. And he talked in great detail about his work with the puppets. So that's all in the book. He, as you said, I mean, he's involved at U of T. He was very involved in the Toronto Santa Claus Parade. He actually saved it when Eaton's went bankrupt and tried to kill the parade. He salvaged it. So he was one of these people that, even though had a huge career in California and was big, he never lost his Toronto connections. He was, you know, back and forth all the time. Absolute mensch of a guy.
And his movie about Hurricane Reuben Carter was filmed here, and we got to play ourselves here in Toronto. And like, I'm often at, there's a place where Annette turns into DuPont at Dundas, and there's a bridge there. And I'll point out to my kids, that's the bridge where they crashed in the hurricane. So shout out to Norman Jewison. Now, a few times I mentioned the Stephen Stone episode, but that was on the heels of the Stu Stone episode. He's a fellow FOTM Hall of Famer, Ed. And I asked Stu Stone about this gentleman who, you know, he crossed paths with many times in his illustrious child actor voiceover career. But let's listen to some Inspector Gadget.
Sorry about that. What's up, Chief?
Here's your assignment.
The cows in Metro City area have suddenly stopped giving milk. Suspect Dr. Clore is involved. Go to Metro Dairy Farm and investigate. This message will self-destruct. Got it, Chief?
Dan Hennessy.
You know, Chief Quimby, obviously, Care Bears, great voice actor on cartoons. I think he was one of these people that was at Second City when it started. He was sort of part of that crew, although he didn't go off sort of into space with John Candy and Catherine O'Hara and the rest of them. He was very, very interestingly in this program, again, get into great detail in the book, that was called Dr. Zonk and the Zunkins. That was the first show that John Candy was on, and Dan Aykroyd was on it. And all the, like we were saying earlier, if you weren't on King of Kensington, you were on Dr. Zonk. And Nina Keogh was a puppet operator on that show. And so there are all these SCTV people, and it was basically because the producer from CBC was in charge of that after school zone that was so, you know, desired. He was going to Second City and seeing all these people. These guys are going to be huge. I got to get them on TV. So he built these kid shows around them. And it drives me nuts that there's so much reverence for SCTV and their careers of Eugene Levy and all this. But those programs are just rotting away in the vault at the CBC, when if this was an American thing, it would be everywhere. It would be on YouTube. It would be on DVD. It would be on streaming. So I'm hoping, in part, maybe the release of this book will bring some awareness to some of these very important cultural pieces that are, you know, frankly paid for by our parents' tax dollars, that should be more widespread. You know?
No, much agreements here. It's funny to hear you talk about this stuff rotting away on a shelf, because you know what else is rotting away on a shelf right now? The Martin Scorsese SCTV documentary. Yes. So common theme here are the docs that don't see the light of day and the docs that do. And the SCTV doc, I don't think if you talk to a FOTM Dave Thomas, he doesn't think we're ever going to see this thing. So put that on the list.
Well, yeah, and you mentioned that we'll never know the story of that one. I mean, something obviously weird happened, because I'm pretty sure that he filmed that. Scorsese shot that whole reunion. That was the whole point of it,
right? And now we've lost people. Yeah, I was going to say we're now losing people who are at that reunion, like Joe Flaherty. So I feel like the more time that goes by without this thing getting complete, the less likely we'll ever see it. So I don't know what went wrong either. I'm sure at some point maybe we'll get some insight into that. But it is a damn shame, because even Rick Moranis attended that reunion.
Well, exactly. And you know what? Was Flaherty this year or last year?
Last year, I think.
Okay.
I don't think he's this year. I think he's last fall. I think 2023. But yeah, there's another great one to lose. And it just saddens me. Like you talked about how we're losing all these people from the 60s and the 70s now are going. But, we're going to be losing more and more of these SCTV people that we grew up watching in the early 80s, etc. Like it's father time comes for us all. But before we say goodbye, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, why don't we skip that next thing, because I'd rather end on this note. Did you see the movie about the first night of SNL?
You know what? Not yet, but it's on my list. My 23-year-old, almost 23-year-old told me, Dad, you got to see this thing. So I will see it. Have you seen it?
Yes, I enjoyed it. I think it's really interesting. But what it made me think about was, again, here's an American institution that's been, absolutely lionized. And here's this guy, that basically from Montreal cut his teeth in Toronto. Nothing made about that. But what a shame that there isn't a film or something like that for SCTV. You know what I mean? Like, we know that over time, it has shown to be so ahead of so many other things. I mean, it occurred to me when I was thinking about this recently, the idea of setting it at a TV station was such a stroke of genius, right? Because again, we're so seeped in all that media criticism now, but back then, to basically say, well, we don't have any money. We want to do sketch comedy, but what's the sort of through line that will keep it all hanging together? And it's a TV station. It's brilliant. And then we can make fun of all the shit we saw at City TV and all the stuff that was happening and all
Brock
those
Linehan.
Characters. Exactly. Brock Linehan and Boogie and Mel's Rockpile. And there's loads of it. And it's gold. And it's so sad to me that even with the clout of Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy and all them, for whatever reason, we can't get our shit together and put out films or documentaries that are talking about these things. So it is up to you and I, right? We got to keep the train moving.
It's you and I. I will shout out FOTM Paul Myers, brother of the great King of Kensington actor Mike Myers. But Paul does have a John Candy book coming out, and so I suspect in 2025, because he did a great job on The Kids in the Hall, and that ended up becoming a pretty damn good Prime. It was on Prime documentary on The Kids in the Hall, which I felt was something we badly needed here. So I'm hoping we have a similar thing with John Candy and what is going to happen with this new Paul Myers project. But without a doubt, this whole Scorsese SCTV documentary fiasco, like, I don't know what went wrong where, but we need to learn from these mistakes, Ed, and you and I have to keep carrying the torch. And I think we make the Electric Circus doc, we just make it rogue. We don't make any money on it. We air it in like tiny little, I don't know, we'll go hook up at Palma's Kitchen or something and have a viewing party, and we just share it with the masses. We don't make a penny on it, but we do it for love of the game, because we deserve as much retro Ontario as we can in our blood veins.
Love it.
Okay. And we missed Christmas Crackers last year. And Ed, I'm looking you in the eye now via Zoom because you're in port something. I'm here to. We can never miss another Christmas Crackers. Okay, I need you to commit on the record. I'm recording. We will, unless one of us, shouts out Ridley Funeral Home. We need to do this every December until the end of time.
All right, I'm in. And
Happy holidays, Ed.
I promise.
Yeah?
Happy holidays. I promise I will grace the hallowed basement to promote my book when that happens next fall. So there you go.